Welcome to the Come Home podcast, where we connect with leaders, experts, researchers, and advocates dedicated to excelling in education, emotional intelligence, human development, and social impact. Together, we explore the world of human potential, sharing insights, experiences, and the transformative work happening in these fields. I'm Griffin Gervais, founder of Come Home, where we partner with educational organizations and institutions to revolutionize education through emotional intelligence. On this podcast, our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower listeners to leverage emotional intelligence for personal growth and collective impact. Today, I am honored to be joined by Megan Marcus, founder of FuelEd, an organization built on the belief that relationships drive learning. While training as a therapist and researching the social neuroscience of education, Megan saw a critical gap. Teachers, unlike therapists, weren't trained to leverage relationships for student development. This realization led to FuelEd, which now equips educators nationwide with the relational skills to foster meaningful connections. Recognized by Ashoka for its transformative impact, FuelEd is reshaping how we prepare educators. Megan, welcome to the Come Home podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, like I was just saying to you before we hit record, I'm really excited to dive in. Just given the work that both of our organizations are doing, really focusing on adults and what that preparation looks like and what does it mean to be proactive. I'm just really excited, given our couple conversations, to learn more about Fuel Ed and continue to also bring some education and awareness to the importance of pouring into our adults and what that looks like. Before we dive in, though, I ask every person this question who comes on my podcast. So, my company's Come Home. The podcast is called Come Home. When you hear the words come home, what does
Mm.
that mean to you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think about the association of really just the comfort of being in one's own skin, I guess, is what I'm
Mm,
first coming to. Is, of course, home is a place, a safe space where you're with, family and loved ones in an ideal world and where you feel really comfortable. But I think also so much about it is like just being comfortable in your own skin,
yeah.
and really owning who you are, loving who you are, and like making sure no matter where you go, you have that home within yourself.
Yeah. 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 So much, right? I think around the idea and the work around emotional intelligence and what that looks like in schools and for students and learning environments is just how well can you start to get to know self, right? And then the other side of it and the exciting side of it is then what do you do with all that learning, all that feedback, all that information? How does it go and present in the world and show up in different things? And so that's spot on. One of the things I wanted to start just asking you, and I feel like this can be great for listeners as well, because I try to explain it as well, but in your world, in your work, if someone was to say, well, Megan, what would you even say an emotionally intelligent leader is or an emotionally intelligent educator is? What would you say to them?
Oh, great question. So our work at FuelEd is uniquely rooted in attachment theory. So
Mm,
attachment theory is the most widely researched and validated field of study on human relationships. And it
hmm
started by studying relationships between parents or caregivers and young children, but it's really been applied more broadly across the lifespan and really even expanded into looking at the neuroscience behind
hmm
why those early attachments and later attachments are so important. And so when I think about emotional intelligence or an emotionally intelligent leader, I think about a leader who is able to build secure attachments. They're also known as a secure attachment figure.
Mm,
So some of the key qualities that you'll see in someone who is organically or with intention builds secure attachments or secure relationships is they're consistent and predictable.
hmm
They're emotionally available to others, right? They can share
mm,
their own emotions with others. They can be open to others' emotions as well. They naturally are going to provide a warmth and acceptance of others.
hmm
They're aware of others' feelings, needs, and perspectives, and they can communicate in a way that demonstrates that awareness or that understanding of others, usually communicating with empathy and
Yeah.
compassion. Some other key qualities are respecting others' autonomy, right? So like just like the way I am a unique human, you are a unique human, and,
Hmm.
and you can kind of have power to control your own decisions. And they also have their own emotional needs met, usually through other
Mm.
secure relationships, so that they can tend to the needs of others in healthy ways. And then another couple that are really interesting are modeling good boundaries, as
Hmm.
well as really helping others transition from states of distress to calm and being regularly
Mm.
equipped to do that.
Yeah. So cool. And even for me, the whole idea and understanding around the attachment styles and things like that, I've learned bits about, but that was through either relationships or other
Yeah.
different types of things, never through like my own educational process in my educational journey. And so even just hearing what you're sharing, I'm sitting back and, I'm thinking to myself, how many educators know what you're talking about? How many educators are sitting there going, yeah, I remember learning about X, Y, and Z, or I remember, right? And how critical that is. And so what you guys are doing is really cool and just bringing that entire different lens and side to those things. When I'm curious to when you are interacting with school districts or leaders themselves around this work, what is it normally rooted in that is giving you guys as Fuel Ed an opportunity to come in and develop and train? Like where's normally that entry point for you guys?
Yeah. So I would say some of the key pain points that will lead folks to FuelEd are either around challenges with student behaviors, right, and the
Hmm.
staff's ability to cope with them. If a lot of students, especially in the last few years and all the tumult and challenges of COVID, but even,
Hmm.
before and beyond that, oftentimes students come into the classroom with a whole lot of their own baggage, their own trauma, and that comes out in ways that might be on the surface quite disruptive to the
Sure.
standard kind of classroom practice. And a lot of times educators might not know quite how to handle that.
Yeah.
Um, we can put every kind of system in place that we want, whether it's, MTSS or social emotional learning
Sure.
curriculum or, other kind of classroom behavior and management. But if at the end of the day, if the educator themselves are getting triggered, if they're not able to manage their own
Sure.
emotions in response, if they're feeling really unaccepting of a certain student, that's going to all get in the way of the relationship, which is going to get in the way of students learning and thriving. So
Yeah.
that could be one kind of area of student
Okay.
behavior. Another reason why folks might get in touch with us is could be around teacher burnout, teacher turnover.
Mm.
The educators needing a lot more care and a lot more support in order to feel like they can show up happy, healthy, and whole to
Yeah.
to the school day after day. And then I would say a final area in which leaders often come to us is around school climate. In
Mm.
order for teachers to feel good about showing up and providing those relationships with students, so much of it rides on whether they feel cared for in the school environment. So a lot of what
Yeah.
we do is actually on the leadership development side of helping the principals, the admin team, really examine their own social emotional competencies, their abilities to build a culture and climate of care for the educators.
Yeah. Yeah, even when you were describing that, kind of just going through those three pieces, one of the things that really stuck out to me and is something that I really try to make sure is communicated and also comes to life is this isn't a program, it's not a curriculum. What we're really helping you do is take these skills and embody them and embed them into yourself. And that's what I feel like I was hearing you even talk about. It's like, no, 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 we're giving, right? You might have a teacher that's triggered, or you might have an administrator who's struggling with the culture and climate aspect, but if we can foundationally really start to embody and understand and bring these different skills into our lives and how we see things and we interact with people, then it will just simply exist. We don't need to go, oh, where's that book? Let me pull that to figure out what needs to be said next.
I think the best teachers and the best leaders do this. That's what, when we think back to the teacher that made that difference, or, a manager that was just really game changing for us in our career, we can say that they were able to give care, receive care. I was able to negotiate my needs with them. I was able to practice autonomy. And those are all four behaviors of secure attachment right there. Uh,
Yeah.
but you're so right. It's people, not programs, that really make school go around.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. I like that because we're, especially in the education space, we're so quick to go, what's that program? What's that initiative? What's that thing that we can put in the hands of students or adopt to say, we're doing it as that checkbox. And I think ultimately it's always rooted in good intention, but I think when we're not including this adult development, this real, honestly, this real personal experience for the adults and how they're leading and educating, we end up running our head into the barriers, and that's when the things get stuck to the side and it doesn't stick.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
One of the things that I absolutely love, you guys have it on your website, so people who are listening and tuning in, you could check it out on their website. But I love that you guys have just smack dab in the center. It says whole educator equals whole child, right? I
Mhm.
think there's so much just conversation and so much language being used about developing the whole child, developing the whole child. And you're making sure that it's loud and clear that in order for a whole child to exist, a whole educator has to exist. So I know you're already touching on some of the pieces, but what does that, if someone was to see that, what does that mean?
That is a very good question. So I think it comes down to the fact that when we look at how humans, over
Mm,
throughout the course of human history, how the way we've evolved and developed, and the way that really biologically we're wired is that no learning happens without relationship.
mm,
From the earliest learning to all the way throughout the course of the lifespan, we really are always going to be learning best through the people that care for us,
hmm.
through the people that love us. That's when we feel safe enough to receive something new, to challenge ourselves. Uh,
Sure.
and so when we think about this ultimate goal of a whole child, of a child that's not just academically successful, but socially and emotionally successful, able to overcome challenges and barriers, we really need to break it down to, okay, and how do we get to that outcome?
Mm,
Ultimately, it's through these exchanges that we have, through the relationship and through the care that's provided, that allows a child to develop perspective of another person's feelings, right? When
mm,
I'm heard and seen, now I understand my own feelings, right? It's so much less about I'm a teacher, I'm going to come in and I'm going to teach about these emotions, although that type of direct instruction is, I think it's important component of social
sure.
emotional learning. But how much more do I learn about my own emotional world when I'm suddenly in distress and I have someone, an educator or a friend or a parent who can sit
Hmm.
down and say, you are really frustrated right now, and tell me the story of what
Sure.
happened in a way that creates coherence for me. And not
Mm,
only does that moment have a calming effect on the student or adult, if it's like a principal to a teacher, but I've learned that I can actually move from distress to calm, and I can do that through trusting and relying on others.
mm,
But how can anyone provide that for a student or another adult if they themselves don't have the skills,
sure.
haven't had the exposures needed to either to grow that ability? And so that's why ultimately we're really skipping many steps if we're saying we want to go straight to teachers teaching students social emotional learning, because
Yeah,
95% of the social emotional learning and development is not taught like other cognitive skills.
sure. Yeah, it's in the it's in those quick moments. It's in those small little pieces. I'll use an example with one of the universities that I had worked with is, um, you know, you're talking 50 minutes, 3 days a week, students would come in and content and all the things. So in the teachers' minds, they're going, we got
Mm,
15 minutes to get through as much as we can because the students need to get it. And it wasn't that they weren't lacking empathy. It wasn't that they weren't
yeah.
wanting to build relationship. They felt constrained by this lens
Right.
of time. And so
Right.
I have to do my job, right? And so while we were going through the process of developing these skills though for themselves, they started to really take on this perspective of how can I just check in with students? How can I just start to see what's going on and be observant through that lens? Because if they're not in an emotionally regulated space
Yeah.
to learn, no, learning's not going to occur. So it doesn't matter what I'm saying, it doesn't matter what the conversation is. If they're not with me or in a space or have the ability to manage and move through emotions to be in that space, nothing's ever going to happen. And it was really cool because one time this teacher walked in and goes, "The coolest thing just happened." And we were, the whole group was like, "Well, what?" They were like, "I saw this student. I kind of could just tell that like
Mm,
something wasn't th on." They're like, so I went up to them, checked in, like I could tell, like, okay, had a whole conversation after class and learned so much about their entire experience right now. And this actually gave the professor an opportunity to meet them in vulnerability to
amazing.
share as well. And she had said to me, she was like, if I didn't have that one little lens to take that 30 seconds, I would have completely missed that whole thing.
Yeah,
But that,
exactly.
right? But that's a lot of what you're talking about right now. That's
That is that, yes.
right?
Having
It's
a
like,
different frame, like being able to, I think so much that's game changing about this work is it's what teachers kind of believe. It's what draws them to the field. They're like, I want to make a difference. I want to change lives. But then they
yeah,
enter their training and it's so much of content and pedagogy, which is important, but it's almost
sure.
missing the thing that drew them to it is student.
Yeah,
Um, And then when they go into the field, they end up drowning in the thing that drew them to it because there wasn't the preparation for it. And so when there are trainings expose educators to this lens, it's almost like, thank you. Someone is seeing students through this frame in the way that I see. This makes sense why that student, maybe wasn't able to be as successful in my classroom, why this student maybe bothered me in that way. And
sure.
almost gives them permission to
100%.
prioritize relationships and noticing, like you said, sometimes it's those little moments that you just need to notice what's going on for the student, spend a little time investing, and that can unlock a relationship and a level of trust. But ultimately, and this kind of brings in a whole other topic, but if
Mhm.
schools are not set up or the leadership is not supporting
Sure.
educators in structuring classrooms or even just how the
Mhm.
schedule and the flow of the school day work to allow space for the relationships, and ultimately the teachers are truly set up for failure, and so are the students.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed it with that, and that's a huge piece that's communicated from my end as well. Is right. It's this embodiment. It's this making it your own, coupled with how does it then organizationally exist? Because for it to live, breathe, exist, right? The educators, the students, everyone who's in the building needs the repetitions, the experiences, the opportunities to practice, right? And be in those spaces. But if we don't have our systems and structure set up to allow that to exist, that opportunity isn't going to be there. And a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, we're also not looking at effective teacher effectiveness through the lens of these sort of skill sets. And so that gets stuck to the side. One of the things I wanted to say though, based on what you were saying, and maybe these are things that you've had conversations with educators as well, is I think what's really empowering about the work that you're doing and the things that you're talking about is it's not actually another thing. You're not adding something new. We're looking already at what exists, and we're just bringing and evolving skill sets to to everything that's already there.
Yes.
And I think that's really, I think a lot of educators can kind of breathe and take that sigh of relief because a lot of times it is, well, we
Yes,
don't
another
do
thing on
this,
the
and so
plate.
here,
Yes.
yeah, and maybe this is my own little perspective on it as well, but it's just an evolution of the way in which we educate. And so we're already looking at what exists. Like you said before, there's already a lot of teachers doing incredible things. We're just bringing some intentionality and some skill set to that to even help develop that even deeper.
Wonderful. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
So one of the things I when you're working with educators, or you're looking at um, whether it's already in industry and you're looking at what development and stuff looks like for the teachers or leaders, or even in a higher ed lens, what have you noticed is some of those biggest gaps that exist that you guys, really got to spend a lot of time in trying to fill for these educators?
In terms of like their professional development or
Yeah, yeah, maybe it's their professional development. Maybe it's even, having conversations within districts and you're talking systems and structures and there's just a lot of gaps. I'm just curious, are there themes that you guys come across in terms of like, okay, we're going to have to do this thing again, or we're going to have to look at this piece again, from kind of a reactive lens to help them really create space for this work?
yeah, I think like the biggest themes that we see are as I mentioned before, so much of this really comes back to the leadership's ability to support
Mm,
the educators feeling really seen and safe.
hmm.
So much of our work started with just let's go in and let's support teachers and their
Sure.
ability to build relationships with students. But you kind of start doing that, and teachers say, this is really wonderful, and I want to do this all day with students. But there's not enough structures in terms of the systemic approach to,
Sure.
when is there even time for me to do this, to either kind of process my own emotions or take a little sidebar with this one student so that I could build a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And then B, the feeling of kind of a morale hit when you don't feel like you have a principal or a
Mm,
manager, if it's maybe a dean, that provides that same level of care for you. I think it's
sure.
really hard because oftentimes principals, they were likely really effective teachers. And
Sure.
so maybe building relationships came naturally to them.
Hmm.
And they maybe never needed additional support with student behavior or what the case might be. And so
Yeah.
what we found time again is it's really hard oftentimes for those principals to move outside of that perspective and to
Mm,
come to a place of more acceptance of the teachers that might be struggling, to provide
yeah.
them with the real like care, empathic listening and support, all of those qualities of a secure attachment figure. They just want them to do better, right?
Sure.
And it's hard because they're like, we want to bring in a program to help the teachers do better. And so often we have to orient the leadership to saying this is so much about this rides on your growth and development and your ability to model these things and provide that parallel secure attachment to the teachers so that
Yeah.
they can have their cup filled and do the same for the students.
Yeah. Yeah. And that definitely resonates with me just in terms of the work that I've done and building those partnerships as well. Coming in that middle to support teachers, while great, can also create a barrier and a block. And even just, right, there's now not common language or common practice, right, across the board. And so it's critical for the sustainability and success of the school,
Yeah.
that the leadership is on board. What has that experience been like for you, working to get leaders bought into the understanding that they have to be part of the process? Because I think, like you were saying, I think so often, a school leader's plate is already full with X,
Exactly.
Y, and Z going on. And so oftentimes they hear about the thing, they know it's important, they know who it needs to go directed to, and they go, well, here, we're going to put you here to work with blank. And you're coming in going, sure. And you also are very much part of the process. What has that journey been like for you? And what have you guys learned over time, just in terms of how do you get those leaders bought into the kind of the whole movement of your support within that school?
That's a great question. Yeah, we've evolved and adapted a lot of different approaches over the years. I think right now
Hmm.
it's we've seen it enough times the way in which barriers are experienced when those leaders aren't involved, that now it's really required that the
Mm,
leaders actually go through the process first, and we stage it so they can have their space for their own growth and development
hmm.
before we even launch a program bringing the
Mm,
work teachers. And so I think there's a timing aspect to it, a sequential aspect to it. And I think also ensuring you have the right roles. If the
Sure.
principal is mostly an operational leader or a kind of a community leader, I'm okay if it's, the team of assistant principals
Mm-hmm.
or the deans of culture or the who are the instructional coaches. It's whoever
Sure.
really interfaces and builds community and relationships with the teachers that need to be really, really aligned and start changing some of the way in which they practice and engage.
Yeah. I think that's such a smart adjustment as you guys have been moving forward to make it kind of a non-negotiable, within the work that we're doing. Because I think too, like we've talked about and you were sharing, this is rooted in sustainability and in this long-term transformation. And so every person plays a role in some capacity, and we need every person on board, so that this doesn't become something that people look back and go, oh yeah, what was that thing we did that
Yes. Yeah,
one year for a
exactly.
little bit of time?
Exactly, exactly. And I think a lot of the work of our flagship program is
Mm-hmm.
so personally transformative
Sure.
that it kind of takes people out of even the realm of this is another program. We are
Yeah,
having folks dive into their own triggers, their own trauma, even understanding their own early attachments,
sure.
because the research shows that our ability to build secure attachments with others is very clearly what it's correlated with.
Mm-hmm.
It's either you had it in your early childhood for those, 50, 40 to 60% of us that were blessed with that, or later in life, you have
Mm-hmm.
processed your early experiences, usually through another secure relationship, and have made sense of the ways in which
Yeah.
your early, perhaps insecure experiences have impacted you. Those individuals are called folks with earned secure attachment because it's like you
Mm.
did the work, you earned it yourself.
Earns, I like that.
You earned it. And so that's what we really tried to do in our flagship program is we
Mm-hmm.
expose them to the science of trauma and attachment so they can start to see their students through this lens, one another through this lens, understand how trauma hurts, but relationships heal. So it's a very hopeful
Mm.
message. We give them concrete skills. All educators love that practical skill building. But we also go deeper into self-awareness. What are your triggers? What were your early relationships? How is that showing up? How is that something that you still have that's showing up regularly? And how can you work through that in those moments?
Yeah,
And in this moment now, we give folks space to do that. So it's really quite a healing experience and it really sticks with them. And it's game changing for leaders and for educators in that sense, because it does touch your every personal relationship first.
sure. What are what are some feedback pieces from educators or leaders that you've worked with, when they go through that experience and they go through that personal development and this introspective process while gaining tools and things like that, when they, while they're in it with you or leaving, how are they feeling on the other side of that?
Usually it's very positive, really hopeful in terms of some of like the behavior patterns that we see folks changing and reporting on. I think like there's a few different personas. Like you'll have the maybe more avoidant leader who months later said, I used to just have a really transactional approach to leadership, getting things done. And now I realize I need to spend time with people's feelings, as uncomfortable as that was for me, and sharing even my own self,
Sure.
as uncomfortable as that was for me. And then you'll maybe have the kind of the persona of maybe I'll say an anxiously attached
Hmm.
teacher, I'll say, for example, always maybe trying to do more and add more to the plate, holding themselves to such a high standard of perfection. And perhaps through this experience, they've learned that they can kind of turn the temperature down a little bit,
Mm.
give themselves more grace, appreciate their strengths, and just really be less hard on themselves so that they can stick with it longer, recognize
Yeah,
the good in themselves and the good in their work. And so those are just like, I guess, some stories or anecdotes of
sure.
how the personality change might come about. And in terms of behavioral changes, we see educators reporting just spending more time taking care of themselves, sleeping better, eating
Hmm.
better, going to therapy, maintaining healthy boundaries, some of these real foundations to caring for oneself, that they're
Yeah,
really able to activate because they've done some of that deeper self work. And I think that's really, really important because so much of the message out there today is teachers, take care of yourselves, take care of yourself, take care of yourselves. But that either falls on deaf ears or is almost insulting because it's like, how do you expect me to take care of myself, right?
sure,
So many demands and there's so much work on my plate. And it really can't be an individual burden or an individual solution in that way. It has to
sure.
be through collective care, through community and relationships.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about as you were just describing that is, you're giving people the space and the opportunity and the information to really become conscious to the ways in which they interact with people, how they behave, all the different things, and that's extremely insightful, right? Because then you're not in this autopilot space going home every day, just using the burnout teacher, for example, right? Going home every day being like, it's only Tuesday. Why am I so drained again? Right? Instead, you're like, oh, I actually know where this comes from. And
Right.
you have that roadmap in a sense. You have those skill sets to go, oh, wait a second. I know why I'm doing blank and I know what else I can do that's going to be helpful for me. And so right when educators and leaders and people in schools and even the students as the byproduct go through and get modeled this, they're all just becoming more and more conscious to who they are and how they function and operate.
Exactly. Remember, we were talking about earned secure attachment, those
Hmm.
folks who later in life kind of develop the ability to build secure relationships despite their early childhood trauma. When they actually study how do they even identify these folks, it's actually through listening to the way in which they talk about their childhood. And if they speak
Interesting.
about it with coherence, like they can tell a logical story, they can share the emotional parts of it without getting flooded or overwhelmed, but it is called a coherent narrative. So they rate actually the degree of coherence in the way they tell this story. And further research has been done to show that the brains of folks who have earned secure attachments and this coherent narrative actually have more right left brain integration.
Hmm.
Essentially, it means that they've learned how to utilize both sides of their brain, the right like emotional side with the left
Sure.
logical linear side, in tandem and in a coherent way. And it's really a signal of health.
Yeah.
And so it just shows the ways in which when we're able to, with the help of another person, pause, slow down, make sense of our experiences every single time we do that, we're building our emotional intelligence, building our coherence, and
Yeah.
building our brain's abilities.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, so interesting. And the other piece too that I was thinking of when you were mentioning that is when you have everyone in a learning environment or in a team or whatever that dynamic looks like, operating through this lens of hearing one another, checking in on one another, sharing emotional experiences, trying to kind of navigate and be there to support one another. I think what we start to dismantle is what that approach within school looks like, kind of that hierarchy, right? The leader, the teacher, the student, or even within the classroom, the teacher to student. And instead, it now becomes this cycle and this circle that's like, oh, wait a second, we're actually all co-creating this together.
Yes, I do think so much of it is in the community. So many teachers go into your classroom, you do your thing, and you leave. And the relationships in some of the best schools are the where you have those closer relationships and a sense of community and
Hmm.
camaraderie among
Yeah.
amongst the educators. But I think a lot of lay folk who aren't, working in schools would be surprised to know actually how isolating the being a teacher can be and feel.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, you walk into the building in the morning, it's so early, everyone's already just trying to wake up and they go in their classroom and that door closes and regardless of what, no matter what setting you're in, you're confined to your schedule and your space. And then you see everyone at the end of the day or recess or whatever it is. And yeah, it's like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow, right? So right, having that intentional time though and coupling that too with all of the pedagogy and the content and that work and just creating that dynamic can create so much safety, right? It can make you feel like you're not alone. Oh, this person is getting where I'm coming from. Oh, my team's feeling the same way I'm feeling. That's really empowering because you feel like you're in community, like you were saying.
Exactly. Our vision is that every student and every adult in every school should have at least one person in the
Hmm.
school that they feel safe coming to, speaking to, expressing their needs or concerns. Ideally, many, many more. But I think we'd be saddened and surprised to know how how low that number might be, right?
Yeah.
For students and even teachers in this country in schools.
Yeah. Um, I wanna ask you a question that's very just optimistic, very just in the perfect world. Um, if every school district, if every leader, if every teacher integrated and kind of entered industry with these skill sets, with the ability to infuse this into the schools and classrooms and everything, what do you think? And I guess I'm going to ask it on two parts. Part one is, what do you think that impact would be on the adults within education over time if they all had it?
Mhm.
And then two, what do you think the impact would be on the future of our world, given the students are the ones who are immersed in it day in and day out?
That's an amazing question. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that the schools would be really great workplaces, right? Like some of the
First and
best
foremost.
places to work,
Yeah.
right? Whereas sometimes schools can be really tough environments.
Yeah.
But we humans are social creatures, and if educators all had that sense of belonging, that uh,
Mm,
schools would be really top the list of best places to work.
yeah.
And I think for students, if teachers spend more time with kiddos than even the best parents can. And
Sure.
if every single one of them were really held in the care of educators who had all of that support and all of that training to ensure that students feel safe and seen, really, like we would have, I believe, a very different world. The outcomes of
Mm,
secure attachment range from, pro-social behaviors to self-management, able to
mm,
kind of communicate effectively. It's amazing. Like it's all of
yeah.
the things we wish for ourselves and our those that we love. Really, there would be incredible, incredible outcomes.
Yeah. And I think even to what you're saying, I think when we talk about this development in this work and bringing it to education, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about on the first is the environment and just what you're actually creating in terms of belongingness, psychological safety, those different components that exist. And that's a great environment for all to be able to be involved in. And then there's the skill set side of it. There's the actual skills that you're able to develop and nurture and grow through being in that environment. And then how does that start to transform your lives and your relationships and your careers and moving forward? For me, that's why it's so incredibly critical and important that this work is happening within education because in 10, 20, 30 years from now, these are going to be future leaders of our tech companies and banks and education and government departments and police department, like, people who are members of society. And imagine if they all had it.
And I think our world is changing so rapidly, even knowing what is the purpose of school and what are we preparing them for. We don't know the world in which we're preparing them for.
Sure.
And so, beyond the subject matter and the content that can be taught in school, the most important, the most useful outcomes would be that we develop students who have a sense of social responsibility,
Yeah.
ability to cooperate, an instinct towards altruism. These are the
Mm,
outcomes that we really need from students in schools. And these, to be totally honest, are the visions of the educators. Like we start
yeah.
our workshops with what are the outcomes you wish to see in students? And some groups never even say a word about test scores or academic.
Yeah.
What they want are the outcomes that you see of secure attachment. And so if
Yeah.
we want the outcomes of secure attachment, we need to be building secure attachments.
Mm,
If we want to
yeah.
be building secure attachments, we need to be supporting the adults to grow their own attachment that is
Yeah.
secure.
Yeah, in our industries are saying the same thing. You know, our
Mm,
industries, when it comes to the skill sets that they're looking for, they're not looking,
right.
anything that could be tactical or whatever. They're like, well, we can train and develop them. We need these sort of skill sets. And so
Mhm,
it's like, okay, we're getting all that information. So we need to make sure
mhm.
we're building it. Well, Megan, I appreciate it. I know you and I could probably talk about this kind of stuff and just
Hours
go back and
for
forth
hours.
forever. Um, but I do appreciate you sharing some insight, having this conversation, bringing to light again, even just the idea of how much our attachment styles play such a role in things, and how can we start to understand that and build off of that, and how that shows up for students and as leaders. So I appreciate that. If people want to explore more about Fuel Ed, even learn more about some of the work that you were even just sharing about with me, what is the best way for them to get that information or connect with FuelEd?
Yes, please do visit our website at fueledschools.org, and you can always reach out to us from there. There's a contact us button or a button to book a meeting to learn more, but we would love to be in touch and to bring you into the FuelEd community and on this mission that Griffin and I both are on,
Right.
happy with many other amazing leaders out there.
Absolutely. Yep. We're stronger together. Well, Megan, I appreciate it and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Griffin. Take care.